Music, number 38. Songbirds versus Songbirds, number 3. So we're learning Rabbi Nachman Likutei Moharan, Torah Gimel, one of the primary sources in Breslov Chassidus and music, and as we spoke about last week, particularly complementary with the sources in Chabad Chassidus, Chassidus and music. So here we're talking about the idea of the danger of listening to the wrong kind of music, how it can be a spiritual danger, and danger in other ways, psychologically, emotionally, perhaps even physically. But Rabbi Nachman talks about this spiritual danger, right, which obviously everything stems from that. So where's the danger coming from? So the danger is not coming from all music, or as some would say, the idea of, say, non-Jewish music, for example, or non-kosher music. The danger could come from kosher music also, it could come from Jewish music. And on the contrary, as we've been discussing, based on these various sources, that so-called non-Jewish music can be very well be parv, be a neutral, or can be used for Kedusha, much in the way of the Jewish, let's say, the music of Jewish practice, music of Jewish custom, is drawn from the music of the world, if not most of it. The idea of a particularly Jewish music is distinct from other things, is one that needs to be kind of understood, that we're going to, Mitzvah Shem, get into in another, in future talks, particularly looking at the introduction of Sefer HaNegunim, where the Sefer printed under the auspices of the previous Lubavitcher Rebbe really outlines, really determines what is Jewish music. The introduction sets out to determine what it is, and how it's distinct from other musics of the world. But one thing that it's not completely a separate entity. In fact, it's many ways, it's comprised of music of the world. Like much of Jewish custom, whether it's clothing, whether it's food, it's gathered from those places and countries and cultures where Jews have found themselves. And in fact, the Zohar talks about the purpose of Gullus, the purpose of exile, the purpose of the Jewish people being spread out around the world, as opposed to all being gathered in our homeland, in the land of Israel, and have the temple in Jerusalem. The purpose of that, the inner, deeper purpose, was in order to gather the sparks from around the world, right? To bring, say, non-Jews who are destined to become Jews into the fold, but even in a broader way, to bring sparks of our everyday world under the wings of the Shekhinah into the realm of Kedusha, to elevate the sparks of the world, to essentially conquer the world for holiness in a spiritual way. So this involves, let's say, Jewish people living in one region of the world, utilizing that region's cuisine, that food, and using it for Shabbos, using it for other holidays or simchas. That elevates that food, those particular dishes, those particular flavors. Similarly, certain clothing styles, with obviously, excuse me, within the exceptions, let's say food, using it, of course, in a kosher way. Same thing with clothing styles. So we take clothing styles and use that using in a kosher way, but using those styles of dress from those places. And so on, you can look at different areas of life. Music has the same idea, but is in some ways even more essential to this transformative process. Because as we've mentioned in previous classes, that according to Kabbalah, every nation has its own spiritual influence, its own angelic influence, and the Jews, let's say, taking and the other, so that angel is comprised of a melody. In the case of a large country, it's a national anthem, and by utilizing that national anthem for holy purposes, one can transform the whole country. As the Rebbe uses the example of France. As France, the national anthem, was adopted by Chassidim, and the country itself, he said, it changed in essence, and it had a very, very powerful effect. So this is true of music in general, music of different cultures, etc. So this is to say that not only should we be looking to broaden our musical horizons as those who strive to exist in the realm of holiness. So to cloister oneself, we know that certainly the Chabad approach is to remain extremely firm to the laws and customs of Jewish practice, of Jewish law, of halacha, and the customs, the minhagim. But at the same time, to be extremely expansive in terms of how we relate to other human beings, other Jews, and also other non-Jews. And part of this expansiveness, and part of this understanding the dynamic, how we become acquainted, we become connected, and in such a way that rather than not that we become brought down to a lower level, let's say lower than holiness, in our involvement with the world, and our involvement with other people, with cultures and surrounding aspects, but we elevate it. And so that does take a certain strength, that does take a certain guidance. But it's not something that is left for the Yechidei Segula, for the special tzaddikim and unique people, the Rebbes. It's very common to hear, when talking about the dynamic of using melodies from around the world in Jewish practice, we'll say, yes, the Rebbe used non-Jewish tunes. There's a number of famous ones, Shamil, the French national anthem, and used them in extremely holy settings, the Chassidic Farbrengens, in davening. The Rebbe used it, but we can't use it. So this is not reflective of the Rebbe's philosophy and approach and what he's taught us. Every unique person's situation is unique to them. So it's not to say that every person can be involved in everything, but we can be involved in a lot more, and we should be involved in a lot more than often we think we can, or we're told that we can. So in a way, the Rebbe gives us his kaiches, he gives us his energy, his power. We're his shluchim, we're his messengers in this world, in the places that we are, and part of that is reaching out to other human beings, sharing with them the beauty and the truth of Torah mitzvahs. And part of that is relating to ourselves and relating to others through the musics of these places. Of course, in a kosher way. Of course, each person unique to their situation and their musical taste and their musical ability. And certainly with guidance, but with an expansive attitude. So that's in general how Chassidus and music, we look at the overview of Chassidus in all the different places, and the conclusion that we've come to is that essentially instrumental music is parav, it's neutral, and can and should be used for Kedusha as much as possible, particularly distinctive melodies and rhythms of a place. But at the same time, we understand that vocal music carries with it certain challenges and dangers. So, certainly lyrics, we look at are the lyrics expressing truths that we relate to, that we can resonate with. But even when the lyrics are kosher, as Rabbi Nachman talks about, even when it's in shul at davening, certainly in other settings, we don't know for sure if the individual who's singing, what their kavanas are, what their intentions are. And if their intentions are self-serving, self-aggrandizing, lustful, they will have an effect on us. And that is something that one needs to be cautious of. But if he's saying that no matter what situation, even in shul, right? You could encounter a singer who's coming from a not kosher place. So what, do we avoid all singers? So of course not. So he offers us an eitzah, a tikkun, for how to protect oneself from the possibility that a singer is not coming from a pure and holy and giving selfless place. It's coming from a selfish place, and that could affect us, coarsen us, possibly even harm us. So what is that tikkun? That tikkun is learning Torah Sheba'al Peh B'Layla, oral Torah at night. So after, and he talks about the two birds, the birds of Kedusha that are brought for the purification of the leper of the Metzora, in contrast to the birds of Klippa, which are a result of the Metzoras. What causes the leprosy in Torah? It's harmful speech, right? Which the Rabbi Nachman is relating to harmful singing, and those are that come from the two birds of impurity. So we rectify the birds of impurity with the birds of purity. The birds of purity is holy speech, particularly oral Torah, particularly at night. Now we go back to the beginning of the Torah Gimel, when Rabbi Nachman quoted a very cryptic Agadata, a story, a kind of a fantastical story from the Gemara, among many fantastic tales of Rabbi Bar Bar Chana, Rabba Bar Bar Chana. So the great sage who had many adventures that are recorded in Gemara, and they have contained very many deep secrets, besides just being on the surface very fantastic. So the story was, of course, that Rabbi Bar Bar Chana, he says he saw a giant frog, right, that was as large as a city. And how large was that city? It was 60 houses big. That's how big the frog was. And he said the frog, was eaten. Along came a serpent and ate the frog. You can imagine how big the serpent is, right? And comes a raven and swallows the serpent. It's even bigger, just gigantic raven. And then the raven comes and lands on a tree. And the Gemara wonders how, just appreciating how powerful and large this tree must be. So that's the piece, just translated into English. But the Aramaic of the Gemara, everything in Torah is bediuk, it's exact. So Chassidus really brings this out. We learn from the word, the letters and the words themselves, and not only from the words of the Gemara, but we also quoted the Rashbam, Rabbeinu Shmuel ben Meir, who was the grandson of Rashi. It's a very, very rare place in Gemara where Rashi did not give his own commentary, and his grandson instead gave the primary commentary. And his words also we can interpret in this kind of mystical way, where the words have other meanings. We're taking like a different direction than the simple meaning of the text. And from that, Rabbi Nachman says we can learn this very lesson in this story, this fantastic story. So we're at to look at the PDF on soundheitsrecords.com/classes. This is class 38. And the PDF is a 2-page PDF, or rather maybe one page, but it's the bottom of the left-hand column in the Torah Gimel, the first page of Torah Gimel. So it says like this: V'zeh she'amar Rabbi Bar Bar Chana. This that Rabbi Bar Bar Chana says, L'didi chazili hahi akru kasa. So by myself, I myself have seen this giant frog. Appears Rabbeinu Shmuel. So the Rashbam explains Tzfardeya, right? Akrukasa, right, is an Aramaic word that is clearly not familiar to even regular learners of Gemara, that Rashbam has to come and explain it. This is a frog. But the Hebrew word Sfardeia is very rich. It contains within it two important words. Hainu, Tzipur Deya. So Sfardeia, Tzadik Pei Resh, is the word Tzipur, bird. Daled Ayin is Lashon Das, knowledge. This is a knowledgeable bird. This is a knowing bird. The Haviki Akara de Hagrunya. So it was as big as a large city. So this very strange Lashon language also the Gemara uses to describe a large city. Akara de Hagrunya. So these words, while we translate it in Aramaic as large city, in Hebrew, when we look at it, Meloshin Kara Begaron. Akara, city, is the same exact letters in Hebrew as Kara, to call out. The Hagrunya is the same letters as Garon, meaning throat, to call out with the throat. So the Tzipor, the knowledgeable bird, this is the source of song that comes through the throat, the singing of a singer. As it says in the Sefer Yeshaya, Hainu shahanagina nimsheches mimenu. Kara begaron, to call with one's throat, is a quote from Tanakh, from Yeshaya, meaning that the song, vocal song, comes from this spiritual bird. Vakar dahagrunya kamahave shisin kamahave. So the Gemara asks, how big was this frog? How big was this city that was as big as this frog? It says, Shisin Bati, 60 houses. So when you hear the word 60, right? Anyone who's learned Chassidus and finds these parallel meanings, ears perk up. I know but what is 60? 60 is the Shishim Sidri Mishnah. The six orders of Mishnah. Which is the six is as big as these 60 cities, the six. Hainu Aliyah de Mash Tisakin Bechinis Kar Begarun Aliyah Shisim Bate, that the way to repair this calling from the throat in this negative way is through these 60 cities. Hainu Aliyah de Shisim Mesechtes. This is through the 60 volumes of Talmud, of the oral Torah, Pirush. Rabbeinu Shmuel, Talmudik Amar Law. So Rabbeinu Shmuel says that it's the Gemara saying that, meaning the simple meaning of the Gemara of the commentary here is to explain that this is the actual Gemara speaking, and not Rabbi Bar Chana speaking. Hainu Shilmud Talmud. So when it says that the Talmud is speaking, what Rashbam is saying on a deeper level is that one should learn Gemara, one should learn Talmud. Asa Tanina Balo, and then the Gemara continues that a serpent comes and swallows the frog. Pirush, Rabbeinu Shmuel, Rabba Ka'amar La. So the commentary says that who's saying this? Who's now telling us about the serpent swallowing the frog? This is back to Rabba. The Gemara was speaking, now Rabba is speaking again. When he says Rabba Ka'amar La, it's another way of interpreting that. Hainu. Meaning that the Rabbah is saying that, meaning someone who wants to be a Rabbah. They want to be a Rebbe. They want to be honored with the honor of and the kavod. They're learning Torah in order to be called and honored like a big rabbi. So they're learning not for the correct reasons. They're learning Shalol Lishma. Not Torah, not for its own sake. They're learning it for selfish motives. And so this is the serpent swallows the frog. That someone is learning for the sake that they should be called a Rebbe. They feel good to get that covered to be called a Rebbe. That's their motivation in learning. And obviously this is a very harmful thing. This is connected to the Nachash, the snake, the Yetzer Hara, the Satan, the negativity. So but that's not the end of the story, right? That's the harmful, that's the potential harm. Then the Gemara continues, Asa pushkansa, and comes a raven. In Perish Rabbeinu Shmuel, Urev, he explains it's a raven. The word in Hebrew for raven is Urev. Hainu, al yedei shilum, but shilum b'layla melashon arvis. So orev, a raven, has the same shorish as arvis, as night, right? See, the black raven, black night, they have the same Hebrew root. So meaning that through, so comes the nighttime, that's the raven, ubala, and swallows the serpent. Hainu, umagin alav mina nachashana. The nighttime, learning Torah, the Shishin Bate, the 60 orders of Gemara, that this protects one from the nachash, from the negative forces. And then the Gemara continues, the salak yasiv bilana, that the raven comes and lands on a tree, pirish hamarashah. So one of the great commentators called the Marashah, we're known as the Marashah, he explains, what is this tree? Shehu bechinas Avraham. This is talking about Avram Avinu, Abraham, our father. Shekasev etzlo v'yita eshel. It says by Avraham that he planted an eshel. An eshel is a tree, but an eshel is also interpreted as a house for hosting guests. Shehu bechinas chesed. This is kindness. Avraham is kindness, and Avram planted a tree. Avraham set up a house to welcome guests. This is the special string of kindness that descends across and upon a person when they learn the oral Torah at night. It's going to protect them from this serpent we mentioned above. And the Gemara concludes, Tachazi, come and see, Kama nafish chele de ilono, come and see the power of the tree. Hainu shiraba mitmia es atzmei, shekolchach gaver leinu chaste, that Rabbah is in wonderment, he's in amazement, that so powerful is Hashem's kindness to us, shafilu azel yachal hagen, that even on this incredible danger of a snake coming to swallow us, which is the negative power of a harmful singer, that's nevertheless the power of the protection. This great tree is much greater. Vizehu sheyum she. So now we're on this page, Daf Gimel, on the opposite page, and we're going to say one more little piece. In the second paragraph here. Ubezeh yisyashev ha-semichos shel Mishnah. And this we can resolve the Mishnah in the connection of the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, in the first chapter. Aseh lecha rav. So it says like this, famous Mishnah. You should make for yourself a rav. You should have a rav, you should have a rabbi who guides you and teaches you. And then the Mishnah continues, Uknei lecha chaver, and you should acquire for yourself a friend. V'haveg dan es kol adam lechav zchus. And the Mishnah, this piece of the Mishnah concludes, and you should judge every person favorably. So these three things are connected. Make for yourself a rabbi, acquire for yourself a friend, and judge everyone favorably. And this is connected to this experience with music, Rabbi Nachman says, that through hearing the negative song we mentioned above, through hearing the positive song, that a person can fix and rebuild their malchus. That's the idea of having a master, having a rav. Is the idea of malchus, of kingship. One restores their sense of kingship, of mastery over their life. They've repaired the malchus, they've repaired the kingship, the aspect of mastery in their life. And this is through acquiring oneself a friend, because the word kana, which means to acquire, which could also mean pen, also is also a reed, which is referring to the reed of the throat, the voice box and the pharynx that one can speak and sing through. Shakol yotze mimenu, that's where the voice comes from. Shemechaber hashnei keruvim liyos panim b'panim. Kamar ish v'levias bizman. So this is the idea of the two keruvim, the two cherubs on the cover of the Aron Kodesh of the Holy Ark, that they're face to face, like a person and someone escorting them, that they're connecting in a positive way, that they're friends. Bisman Shisro oisim ritzon Hashem makom. At the time, the Jewish people are doing God's will. Then, when one repairs their sense of kingship, of mastery, then one has mastery over anything they want. When one can, it's not just a protection; it goes beyond that. It's a true kingship over one's domain, that one can have mastery over anything in that they encounter, anything in their lives. And a person will have power in their hands of life and death, spiritually. So a person could, therefore, based on an unbridled will, could destroy things they don't jibe with. That's why it says the third piece, that judge everyone favorably. If it was just the first two pieces, one, that you rebuild the malchus through the positive song, that you have powerful singer and you have mastery. Two, this is particularly through the singing and the connection of the singing. So that on its own, without the third piece, without the judging favorably, could be very damaging. And this is what this harmful singer has. When they're self-aggrandizing, they're not judging others favorably. One is focused on themselves. The definition of self-aggrandizing, they think themselves better than others. So they're judging others unfavorably. So without this third piece, what you have is the phenomenon of singers who cause harm. Singers who gain power through their charisma, through their fame, and actually cause harm because they don't have the third piece. Their arrogance prevents them from being able to judge others favorably, which requires humility. The one needs to judge every person favorably. Hashem does not want the world to be destroyed. Even if a person is a powerful singer and has this power and is causing harm to those who, quote unquote, deserve it, that's not what Hashem wants. Hashem doesn't want the negative to be destroyed. He wants it to be transformed and uplifted. A singer's power is not in overpowering others and cutting others and dominating others. That's possible, a singer can have that power. But that's not the true power in Kedusha. True power is drawing close, elevating. Dan l'chav schus. Right? Through this, we elevate a person to true schus. When you judge a person favorably, you elevate them to favor. Ki lo l'so bara l'sheves yitzor. The world, Hashem did not create the world for chaos. He created it to be settled, for us to get along with each other. When you see someone you don't get along with, it's an opportunity, it's a challenge to make a positive connection. This is our task. This is our task as a musician, particularly as a singer, to use the power of our singing, the tremendous power of music. It's much greater than we think it is. The charisma that we have as a singer, as a musician, and to use it not just for the good in a general sense, because the good could be good for me too, only, primarily. It's the good because we're interested, we're judging everyone favorably, therefore we see others, even those who are falling short of our expectations, or even of truth and of positivity. But we're looking to repair. We're looking to educate, to connect, to uplift. That's the power of a true singer in the realm of holiness. That we have a power with our song to not ignore or push off any individual that is not to our liking. Because it's our job, l'dan l'chavschus, kol adam, every person, Jew and non-Jew, judge them favorably. Judge them and therefore elevate them to a positive. Doesn't mean, obviously, that we are not conscious of those who may be potentially harmful. We can protect ourselves. But at the same time, even if it's from a distance, we look for that spark of good and we look to elevate it. Right? It's not a matter of allowing prisoners to go free, harmful, violent prisoners, let's say, for example. That's not judging favorably. That's just allowing anyone to do what they want. Yeah, he has to be locked up, let's say, to protect himself and others. But we still have favorable thoughts of them. We still are thinking of how we could be of help to them. Obviously, one person. How many people can one person be of positive benefit to others? So through standard favorable deeds, kind deeds, you can help a few people, feed a bunch of people, right? So you can teach a bunch of people. But who has the greatest power, the broadest power? These are singers. So all the singers out there and the musicians who back up the singers should realize the power. The singer has a power, as Rabbi Nachman is going to go on to say. He has a power to be foolish and arrogant. That's unfortunately very common. But they have the power to be much more than that, to be extremely humble and extremely transformative and uplifting. And we should remember that and cultivate our music, cultivate our singing for that purpose. And ultimately redeem ourselves, redeem those around us, redeem the world. Because as we say, with abundant singing and playing of music, we bring about the true and complete redemption.